the Tracks.
Across the Tracks.
So that's the title of the book. Now, the book deals with loss because the kids on the west side of the tracks were very upset because they had looked forward to going to the high school where their parents graduated from, their older siblings graduated from, and so they were basically experiencing this loss. Whereas on the other side of the tracks, many of the white kids were losing their friends to private school because they were taking them out of school. So it deals with some loss, some grief, but the main thing is how the black kids were looked upon as being different. So different to the point that they were ostracized. They were called mean and cruel names. And even to the point where in their identity, the things that identified them as black were being questioned.
Amen.
So it deals with that as well.
Amen. But I just want to, again, just thank you for being here today. And I just want to let the audience know that, we're going to talk about a little bit about the black culture from your book, Over the Tracks, and where it originated from, and the solution, and what were some of the problems that you encountered. So if you want to, this whole show is going to be towards Black history, but Black history coming from your perspective, and how the young people and also young adults today experience maybe some of the same things happened back in that time. Nothing has changed but time.
You're right. Well, I'm a product of the 60s and the early 70s. That was the time that I grew up. And so in this book, back in those days, it was very difficult to get blacks being projected in the media, in TV, in print with a positive image.
Amen.
Most of the images were dark. They were of crime. They were of mischief.
Yes.
And therefore, there was this public persona that's how all blacks were. So that was a stigma that blacks were working to overcome. Mm-hmm. Even in the civil rights movement.
Yes.
I am a man. You would see signs like that, wherein a lot of the people who were working in various different establishments were treated less than a man.
Amen.
So now, with integrated schools coming in, now the black kids are going to the white schools. Now they are looked at with all of those inferiorities that the white culture had placed upon them prior to them getting there.
You're right.
So
Amen.
Not only was there a struggle to get justice across the track at the stores, at the shops, etc., but now you're in school and you're being judged with your answers, and are you really being recognized for the right answer?
And the right answer. Yeah, I'm going to share a little bit also, but what you're talking about today are some things that you experienced also. Before I came to Harrisburg, I'm going to share a little bit about the history that I lived years ago. Before I came to Harrisburg, a lot of people don't even know, I'm from the state of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I went to elementary school there and middle school in North Carolina before coming to Harrisburg. And when I was in elementary school, I went to an all-black elementary school in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And a lot of folks don't know that, and some of my family members probably don't even know that, that's, and my grandkids, I never told that story to them. But I went to an all-black elementary school and also middle school there in North Carolina way back in the 60s.
Right.
Back in the 60s. And basically, I come from an area that was segregated. There was no whites in my school at all. So I came to Harrisburg years later, and then the school was integrated. And I would share that a little bit more in detail, but I want to continue sharing your story, because it's all about you and what you have done. I want to expose the community here to hear your story in this month that we call Black History Month.
Well, see, back in those days, when the races were separated, and when we're talking about schooling and so forth and so on, with just racial lines and so forth, basically, all we knew about each other is what we saw in print or on TV or in the news.
Yeah.
Perfect example in my book. Here's the kids walking to school on their first day. These are the black kids walking over the tracks to go to the all-white school the very first day. And here they say, "What do you think it'll be like?" I asked. All I know is they better not act like little Timmy Mitchell, little Dennis Mitchell, always playing stupid tricks, said Elijah. And they better not be dumb asking stupid questions like Beaver Cleaver. Yo, book, breathing, said Ox. He's just a little kid, etc., etc. Well, they better not ask any dumb questions like whiny little Timmy on Lassie. Now here the narrator comes in and he says, "It was sad but true. Our perception of the kids across the tracks came from what we saw on TV. And if they used the same source for us, we were little jungle bunnies, little monkey boys running around climbing coconut trees on Tarzan." And so that was their first day. They were just walking up and they're saying, "Man, they better not be like Dennis Mitchell on Dennis the Menace, or like Beaver Cleaver on Leave It to Beaver," because that was the association they had that they knew of, because they had never basically interacted with these white kids.
Yes, amen, absolutely. So what we're doing today is just sharing information with you, as far as, what our level of the black culture and the time that we grew up, stuff like that. And there's a lot of kids in my area when I was in North Carolina in the elementary school and the middle school, they never went to a white school. It was all, and what they've seen is all of black kids there. It was not integrated. It was only integrated until 1969.
Right.
1969 in North Carolina, the school I was supposed to graduate from. What happened was, 3 years later, they integrated the school. So therefore, it's integrated in 1969, and then that's when the schools were busing. That's when they had the thing called busing.
Yes.
All throughout down the South, busing.
Yes.
Mostly black kids went to white schools, and not so much white kids go to black schools. It wasn't like that. It was the other way around. It was the black kids from my community went to the white school.
Exactly.
Called 71st High School. Yeah.
Exactly. And kids today have grown up with all integrated schools.
Yeah.
So we're taking you back in history to when it really first began. Amen. And how the perceptions of each student was about the other. So now these kids now are getting to the crest of the hill to go across the tracks to the white school. And this is what occurs. As they reach the base of the hill leading up to the railroad tracks, they heard a rumbling. It grew louder with each step. We proceeded with caution. Passing Hank's gas station at the crest of the mound, they came into view. "What the HEW hockey stick?" Elijah gasped. We stopped cold stare. All kids traveling the same route responded likewise. At the rear of the Piggly Wiggly, a mob had gathered, blocking our path to the school. Police and state troopers, cars lined the tracks on the east side. The angry crowd hoisted their white signs skyward, spat racial slurs against integration in the schools. The officers fought for the control. My mind flashed back to the riot, because the year before there was a race riot in this town. The firebombing of Roland's Market and me running for safety. But school was my future. No running from it. We stood our ground on the west side, 2 blocks from the East Side High. I ain't going over there. Let's go back, Trimble. If we run now, we'll be running from them for the rest of our lives. Wow. That's what they want us to do. Run, May. Remember what Mama said. God didn't give us a spirit of fear. I preached. JG's right, May. They scared our parents all their lives. But this is the law. We can't let them stop us. Since they closed our school, Eastside Junior is just as much as ours as it is theirs. This is 13-year-old kids. So you hear it from a 13-year-old's perspective. Like, here's this angry mob. You see all these documentaries on TV, The Little Rock Nine, and so forth. And it's told from an adult perspective. My book is told from these little 13-year-old kids and how they had to face this mob in going across the tracks.
Amen.
Wherein they held their signs with racial slurs and in the back of pickup trucks and yelled and was spitting just racial slangs and the N-words, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you deal with that?
Amen.
Just being 13.
And I just want to say absolutely. So just like you indicated, we're taking you back in the 60s and late part of the 59 to the 60s into the 70 era, you know, well, mostly in the 60s, early part of the 60s, you know, what I went through as a young man, as a young kid in elementary school and junior high down there, which no one up here knows about, but, you know, we live Black history. We lived that moment because Dr. King used to come through our town.
Yes, yes.
And Medgar Evers and also the other civil rights people that you probably read about in the magazine. We've seen some of those people.
Yes.
We've seen some of those individuals, like just like the Greensboro Seven, who sent into the Lutz counter. But I don't have time to tell you all my history, how I live Black history. But we want to govern a little bit more of his book. What's it called again?
Over the Tracks.
Over the Tracks. Yeah. As far as the 13-year-olds, how did they perceive as when they got into the school, maybe the first day, the first week, or the first month, and how was they perceived from that time until school was over that first year?
Well, even before they got into the school, even before they crossed the tracks, now the state troopers are coming across to escort them.
Gotcha.
And you would think that the kids would have felt secure in having the troopers come and escort them across the track. But they were leery of the police because of how they had been treated in their community prior to them offering them assistance.
Amen.
The year before, one of the 13-year-olds lost his cousin to police violence during the riot, wherein they thought he had something other than a rock, and they proceeded to chase him down, and he lost his life. Excuse me. So now, Booker, one of the characters, is like, there's no way I'm trusting them to go over there.
Amen. Amen.
And the other kids had to convince him, like, look, it's either we go now or we're not going at all. Where we're going. So you kind of see the mistrust had already been built within the Black community with trusting police and police officers as to how they were being treated, their parents were being treated prior to going across. But eventually they did go across and met up with, you know, other people in the school, but then they go to the front gate wherein the Black kids were being bussed in. These were the walkers. But when one of the kids said, you ought to go see out front, they're walking in through the back. The front, there was a storm of parents outside in the front yelling the same things as these kids had to be escorted into the school through the front. So you say, well, why go back to that? Well, we go back to that because that's part of the history of this nation.
Amen.
You know, and that history, some seem not to want it to be told.